While I am happy to see VenomFangX being taken down a peg, I do have some criticisms of what you say here. Firstly, I should note that we do see animal behaviour that mirrors our own immorality. Our closest relative, the chimpanzee, exhibits behaviour much like that of murder, mugging, rape, and war. I say much like because I don't want to imply that they are moral animals. Secondly, while natural selection can explain why we exhibit ethical behaviour, these explanations do not carry prescriptive weight. I know why I tend to prefer honesty in myself and others, but that explanation does not entail that I ought to be honest. Evolution explains why we can be moral, but it does not and cannot establish objective moral values. Fortunately, we do not need to turn to any empirical observations to floor VenomFangX's argument. It really is that lame, but then, this is someone who still tries to use the argument from first cause. His argument runs something like this. 1. Moral value is objective. 2. Only God can provide a foundation for objective value. 3. Therefore, God must exist. The argument is valid, I will grant him that, but it is unsound. Let's start with how he attempts to establish the first premise. He begins by asking if morality is objective, and he has answered that it is subjective. He then draws some dubious consequences of that, which assumes that subjective morality must be relative. He does nothing to establish that assumption, but for the sake of this argument, we can grant it. The consequences are not liked, and so he concludes that morality must therefore be objective. However, reality does not conform to what we would like it to be. Finding a conclusion unpalatable does not entail that it is wrong, so even allowing his assumption, he fails to establish the premise. Next, we find that he makes no attempt to establish the second premise, that only God can provide a foundation for objective value. He simply states it. However, the second premise is demonstrably false. Long ago, Plato wrote a dialogue called the Euthyphro. In this, Socrates asks Euthyphro, "What is piety?" He is answered with a list of pious acts, but Socrates stops him and says, "No, those are particulars. I want to know what pious itself is. What is it that makes these things pious?" Euthyphro tells him that pious things are pious because the gods will them. Socrates then asks, "Well, why do the gods will them?" To which he is answered, "Because they are pious." The point of the story is that for the statement God's will is good, to in any way describe God's will, good must refer to something other than God's will, else all we are saying is that God wills what God wills, which carries no prescriptive weight. God cannot have created good, because then it would be identical to God's will. Good must be something anterior to God. As a point of logic, then, God cannot provide the foundation for objective moral value, making ethics an essentially secular study and practice. Having now had the chance to look at a few of VenomFangX's videos, it is clear that his understanding of philosophy is easily as poor as his understanding of science. My regards, Filebus.